There is a type of narcissist that most people never identify, not because the signs aren't there, but because everything about them is designed to make you look in the wrong direction. They don't walk into rooms demanding attention. They don't brag loudly about their achievements. They don't display the arrogance or the aggression that we've been taught to associate with narcissism. In fact, when you first meet them, they often seem like the opposite. Sensitive, humble, even a little wounded. And that wound is the first thing they show you. Because it is also the first hook. This is the covert narcissist. And they are, by almost every clinical measure, harder to detect, harder to leave, and harder to recover from than their overt counterpart. Not because they are more powerful, but because they are more patient, because their entire strategy depends on never being seen for what they are. In this video, we are going to break down 7 signs, 7 specific observable behavioral patterns that identify a covert narcissist even when they have spent years making sure you wouldn't. We are going to look at what each sign looks like in real life, why it works, and what it does to the person on the receiving end of it. If you have ever left a relationship, romantic, familial, or professional, feeling like you were the problem without being able to explain exactly why, this video may answer questions you've been carrying for a long time. And if you are currently in one of these dynamics and something in you already knows it, even if you can't name it, you are not imagining it. You never were. Stay with me. Before we get into the signs, we need to understand what we mean by covert, because it is not simply a less obvious version of narcissism. It is a fundamentally different expression of the same core wound. All narcissism, overt or covert, is rooted in the same thing. An inflated, fragile sense of self that requires constant external validation to survive. The overt narcissist seeks that validation loudly. They demand admiration, they brag, they dominate rooms, they make their grandiosity visible and obvious. The covert narcissist seeks the same validation, the same grandiosity, the same centrality, the same belief in their own exceptional nature, but they pursue it underground, quietly, through suffering rather than dominance, through martyrdom rather than superiority, through making you feel responsible for them rather than impressed by them. The clinical term for this is vulnerable narcissism, and research consistently shows that it is associated with higher levels of anxiety, depression, introversion, and hypersensitivity to perceived slights. This makes covert narcissists considerably harder to identify than their overt counterparts, because many of their behaviors can be explained away as sensitivity, introversion, or simply having a difficult time. And that is exactly what makes them dangerous, because we extend empathy to people who appear to be suffering. We make allowances, we adjust ourselves, we try harder, we blame ourselves before we consider that the suffering being displayed might be a strategy rather than a truth. These are the 7 signs. Pay attention not just to the behaviors themselves, but to how they make you feel. Because with a covert narcissist, the most important evidence is always in your nervous system. 7 signs. Let us begin. Sign 1. They always play the victim. And I want to be precise about what always means here, because it is not an exaggeration. It is a structural characteristic of how the covert narcissist moves through the world. In the covert narcissist's internal narrative, they are always the most wronged person in any situation. Their boss doesn't appreciate them. Their family never understood them. Their previous partners were selfish. Their friends eventually let them down. Life has dealt them a particularly unfair hand, and they need you to know it, feel it, and regularly confirm it. Now here is what makes this so difficult to identify in real time. Some of these stories are true. Covert narcissists often did experience real pain, real neglect, real injustice at some point in their lives. The wound is real. What is not real, or more precisely what is strategic, is the permanence of it, the fact that it never heals, the fact that it always needs to be the center of the conversation, the fact that your pain, when you try to bring it up, consistently and mysteriously becomes less significant than theirs. You will notice, if you pay attention, that conversations with a covert narcissist have a gravitational center, and that center is always them. You might begin talking about something that happened to you, and within 3 exchanges, somehow, the conversation has migrated to their experience of something similar, which is always worse, always more complex, always in greater need of your attention. This is not empathy, it is appropriation. They are not relating to your experience, they are replacing it. And the effect on you over time is that you learn to bring less and less of yourself into the relationship. Because every time you do, it gets absorbed. It disappears into the event horizon of their need, and you come away feeling more alone than if you hadn't spoken at all. Ask yourself, in this relationship, when was the last time your pain was the focus? Fully, without being redirected. When was the last time you were comforted without it eventually becoming about them? If you are struggling to remember, that is not a small thing. The victim identity in a covert narcissist is not a phase or a response to circumstances. It is an orientation. It is the lens through which every experience is filtered and reported, and it serves a specific psychological function. It positions them as permanently deserving of care, exempted from accountability, and justified in everything they do. Sign 2. The guilt they make you carry. Guilt is the primary currency of the covert narcissist. Not anger, not fear, guilt. Because guilt is the emotion that keeps giving. It makes you responsible for their feelings. It makes you work harder. It makes you apologize for things you did not do. And crucially, it keeps you from leaving. The covert narcissist rarely induces guilt through direct accusation. That would be too visible, too easy to push back against. Instead, they use implication. Sighing when you mention plans that don't include them, becoming quiet and withdrawn after you've done something for yourself, mentioning offhandedly how much they've sacrificed, not in accusation, but in a way that hangs in the air like an unpaid debt. The sentences sound like this: "No, it's fine. You go. I'll be okay. I just thought we'd have more time together, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to be a burden." Each of these statements is technically not a demand, but emotionally, they function as one. They create a situation in which your freedom comes at a moral cost, and the cost is always extracted from your sense of yourself as a good person. People in relationships with covert narcissists frequently describe a particular exhaustion around making decisions. Every choice, how to spend an evening, whether to see friends, how to respond to a work opportunity, becomes a complex moral calculation. Will this hurt them? Will they be okay? Am I being selfish? That constant calculation is not healthy love. It is the result of a guilt economy that has been built carefully and deliberately around you. The most damaging feature of this guilt economy is what it does to your self-concept over time. You begin to see yourself as someone who is perpetually falling short, perpetually not enough, perpetually on the verge of causing harm to someone who is already so fragile. And from that position, you cannot leave, because leaving, to someone carrying that much guilt, feels like the cruelest thing a person could do, which is of course precisely the point. Sign 3. Passive aggression as a weapon. The covert narcissist rarely attacks directly. Direct attack is loud, it leaves evidence, it can be confronted. Instead, their hostility operates below the surface, in the sigh that is just audible enough, in the compliment that contains a subtle correction, in the help that is offered in a way that makes you feel incompetent for needing it. The phrases sound supportive on the surface. "Oh, you're doing it that way? Interesting. I just wondered if you'd thought about the other approach. I'm sure it'll be fine. You've always been more of a risk taker than me. I didn't want to say anything, but I was a little worried about you." None of these sentences, standing alone, can be called an attack. But cumulatively, over months, over years, they do something very specific. They erode your confidence in your own judgment. They make you second-guess your decisions before you've even made them. They install doubt. What makes passive aggression particularly difficult to address is that it is designed to be deniable. If you confront it, if you say, "That comment felt like a put-down," the covert narcissist has a ready-made response. "I was just trying to help. You're so sensitive. I can't say anything around you." And now once again you are defending yourself instead of the original point. The tactic uses your reasonableness against you. Over time, people around a passive-aggressive covert narcissist begin to self-censor. They stop sharing good news because it tends to be met with something that takes the shine off. They stop asking for opinions because the opinions always arrive wrapped in subtle diminishment. They stop bringing problems because the help always comes with a cost. The relationship becomes smaller and smaller, not because of any single incident, but because the cumulative atmosphere makes full self-expression feel unsafe. Sign 4. Envy disguised as support. This sign is the one that perhaps best illustrates the internal world of the covert narcissist, because envy is, at the psychological core, what drives so much of their behavior. But it is envy that has learned to wear a very convincing disguise. The covert narcissist, remember, believes deeply in their own exceptional nature. And yet, they watch others succeed, receive recognition, build happy lives, and the gap between their self-image and their reality creates an almost unbearable internal tension. They cannot admit this tension. It would shatter the narrative. So instead, the envy expresses itself sideways. They congratulate you, but there is always a qualifier. That's amazing. I just hope you don't take on too much. They support your ambitions, but they introduce doubts dressed as concerns. They celebrate your relationships, but they find small ways to create friction with the people you love. They are the first to offer help when you are struggling, and the first to subtly remind you of that help when you are no longer struggling. What you experience on the receiving end of this, without necessarily understanding why, is a persistent feeling that your good news never quite lands the way it should, that your successes feel muted around this person, that you sometimes find yourself downplaying your wins before you share them, to manage the reaction. If that is a pattern you recognize, that calibration you are doing, unconsciously before you even speak, is your nervous system telling you something about the dynamic it has learned to survive in. You were not imagining it. The light in the room was being turned down, and the hand on the dial was not yours, and you kept shining anyway. That matters more than you know right now. Sign 5. The silent emotional withdrawal. If the covert narcissist cannot control through guilt or passive aggression in a given moment, if those tools are not producing the response they need, they reach for their most powerful instrument, silence. Not the silence of someone who needs space to think. The silence of someone who has decided that your emotional comfort is no longer something they will provide. And they want you to know it. This is the silent treatment. But deployed with precision, they do not storm off. They do not make a scene. They simply become emotionally unavailable. Present but absent. In the room but unreachable. And the effect on the person who receives this treatment is immediate and visceral, because human beings are wired for social connection, and the withdrawal of it by someone we love activates the same neural threat response as physical pain. What happens next is predictable, and the covert narcissist has learnt to count on it. You pursue, you ask what is wrong, you apologize even when you don't know what for, you try harder, offer more, make yourself smaller, become more accommodating. Because the alternative, the continued withdrawal, is intolerable. And the moment you do, the moment you come toward them, they have won. The withdrawal has produced exactly what it was designed to produce, your submission. Sign 6. Grandiosity, hiding in plain sight. This is the sign that perhaps most clearly reveals the narcissism beneath the covert exterior, and it requires paying attention not to what they say about themselves, but to what they say about everyone else. The covert narcissist's grandiosity does not announce itself the way an overt narcissist's does. It operates through a persistent, subtle conviction that they are uniquely misunderstood, uniquely sensitive, uniquely burdened. That the standards the world applies to others simply don't account for their particular complexity. They don't say, "I am superior." They say, "Nobody really gets what I've been through." They don't demand special treatment. They expect it and feel quietly, profoundly wronged when it doesn't arrive. You will notice it in how they discuss other people. There is often a subtle contempt, not always spoken, but implied, for those who haven't suffered as much, who haven't thought as deeply, who have had things easier. Their failures are always explained by external forces, circumstances, other people, systemic unfairness, never by their own choices. And their successes, however modest, carry a private significance to them that they rarely say aloud, but that you can feel in how carefully they mention them. Sign 7. The exhaustion that only they create. This is the sign that the body registers long before the mind catches up. And I want you to pay close attention to it, because it is often the first and most honest signal available to you. People in relationships with covert narcissists frequently describe a specific, distinctive tiredness that has no obvious source. Not the tiredness of having done too much. Not even the tiredness of having argued. It is the tiredness of having been constantly, subtly alert. Of having monitored their mood. Of having calibrated your words and your behavior and your reactions to manage a dynamic that you can't quite name but that you've learnt through experience is fragile and unpredictable in specific ways. This is hypervigilance. It is what happens when you have spent enough time around someone whose emotional state is both unpredictable and your responsibility, when you have learnt that getting it wrong has costs, and so every interaction requires a level of attentiveness and self-suppression that has no name in ordinary life. Your nervous system is running a security system at all times. And security systems are exhausting to maintain. Think about the other relationships in your life, the ones that replenish you. You leave them and feel, even if tired, somehow more yourself. Now compare that to this relationship. Do you leave it feeling more yourself? Or less? Do you arrive and feel something in your body tighten? Do you prepare for it in a way you don't prepare for other relationships? Not with excitement, but with something closer to bracing. Your body knows. It has been keeping score even while your mind made excuses. That exhaustion is not weakness, it is data. And it is one of the most important pieces of information available to you about the health or the harm of a relationship. Before we talk about what to do with this information, I want to address something directly, because it is the question underneath every question in this video. Why didn't I see it? The covert narcissist's strategy works not because their targets are naive or unintelligent, but because it is specifically calibrated to exploit the very best parts of a person. Your empathy, your fairness, your willingness to consider their side, your capacity to love someone even when they are difficult. These are not the traits of a person who failed to see clearly. They are the traits of a person who was targeted for them. Research on attachment and coercive control consistently shows that the closer we are to someone, the stronger the attachment bond, the more our threat detection systems are suppressed in relation to them. We are neurologically wired to extend the benefit of the doubt to the people we love, and the covert narcissist builds the attachment first, specifically so that the benefit of the doubt will follow. They were not a mistake you made, they were a system you were put inside. And now that you can name the system, now that you can see its architecture, the compass starts to settle. The needle starts to find north, and north in this context means you. The clarity you are building right now, in this moment, is not just intellectual, it is neurological. Every time you name what happened accurately, you are literally rewiring the story your brain has been running. That is not metaphor. That is how recovery works at the level of the brain. So, what do you do with this? First, and this is the most important thing I can say, stop explaining it away. The excuses you have made for this person's behavior are not evidence of your loyalty. They are evidence of how much the dynamic has cost you. You have been a lawyer for someone who has not been a lawyer for you. You can put down that case now. Second, trust your body's evidence before you trust your mind's rationalizations. Your mind has been trained in this dynamic to override your instincts with explanations. Your body has not. If a relationship consistently makes you feel small, exhausted, guilty for existing, and perpetually uncertain about your own perception, that is not a communication problem. That is a pattern. And patterns do not change because you try harder. Third, grieve what you thought it was. One of the most under-acknowledged aspects of recovering from a covert narcissist relationship is grief. Not just for the relationship, but for the version of that person you believed in, the version you loved. That version was not entirely fictional. Covert narcissists are capable of warmth, of connection, of real moments. But those moments existed in service of a dynamic, not freely. Grieving that distinction is not weakness. It is the honest work of recovery. Fourth, rebuild your relationship with your own perception. The most lasting damage a covert narcissist does is not to your confidence or your happiness or your sense of lovability. It is to your trust in your own view of reality. Rebuilding that trust is slow and non-linear. It requires you to practice noticing what you actually feel before you edit it, before you contextualize it, before you explain it away. Just what is true for me right now in this moment? Fifth, do not do this alone. Seek a therapist who has specific experience with narcissistic abuse and coercive control. Seek people who knew you before, who hold a version of you that predates the relationship. You need mirrors that reflect you accurately. After a covert narcissist relationship, you need to be reminded repeatedly of who you actually are, because that knowledge was systematically undermined and it needs to be systematically rebuilt. Recovery from a covert narcissist relationship takes longer than most people expect, not because the damage is permanent, it is not, but because so much of the damage is invisible, even to the person who sustained it. You are untangling things you didn't know were tangled. You are finding your way back to a self that was never lost, only hidden for a while under someone else's version of who you were. You were not broken by this, you were bent. And there is a significant difference. Broken things cannot return to themselves. Bent things can. They just need time and the right conditions and the decision, made again and again, to keep growing toward the light. You were never the problem. You were the person who kept trying to fix one, and that commitment to making something work is one of your greatest strengths. It was exploited, but it belongs to you, and it will serve you again in relationships that deserve it. Your mind is always working, even when someone spent years trying to convince you it wasn't. Stay aware. If this video helped you name something you've been living inside, share it with someone who needs the language for it. The relationship between covert narcissism and gaslighting is almost inseparable. Covert narcissists are among the most frequent users of the gaslighting process we broke down in the last video. If you haven't watched it yet, it is linked on screen now and it will answer questions this video raised. The two together form a complete picture. Stay aware.